Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Coach Nick, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Really excited to have you on. Like I said before we got on the before we went live, I'm just so excited to talk to you because you're someone on YouTube that I've been watching for years, and to actually get to talk to you and hear you responding back is really, really cool. So thank you so much. To get started, I'm curious, have you always been Coach Nick, or were you ever Coach Hauselman? Has that ever happened, or were you always Coach Nick?
You know, I was always like Mr. Nick or Coach Nick. I was teaching in high school, and, you know, my last name is Hauselman, and it would get butchered anyway. So it was a little bit easier. And then I was always a Pete Newell fan from Cal in the 60s. He's a guy who, you know, John Wooden couldn't beat the last 10 times they played in the Pac-10 back in the day. So he was always Coach Pete. So I thought that would be a nice homage to him to, like, you know, sort of use the same kind of, you know, structure for how they referred to me. But I don't know. I always felt like it didn't need to be that formal to be able to command enough respect to run a team.
Definitely. And it's so cool to think that way, because a lot of coaches kind of maybe old school, maybe think that way. I'm curious, what did that first steps into coaching look like? Were you, because obviously doing so much video stuff now, did you start doing a lot of video work? What did that look like for you?
Well, I suppose, you know, I was always sort of a coach on the floor. I kind of had that mind for it, as, you know, even as back as like 8th grade, and just, you know, talking to my coaches and analyzing and diagramming. I can remember going, like, as a Bulls fan in 6th grade, there was like talk, you know, it was hard to watch the games. They weren't all on TV. So you'd read about it in the paper how they're running some 1-3-1 defense. So I have a memory of, like, in 6th grade, like, I got to go to a game, and I think I brought some paper and a pen. Like, I wanted to, like, diagram this and see what they were doing. So even back then I was kind of into it. But certainly in a professional sense, when I was a basketball manager at the University of Wisconsin for 2 years, that was really where I cut my teeth in, you know, learning how a Division I program is run from the ground up and everything in between. So that was really where I got an opportunity to learn, I think, a lot about coaching itself and what goes into it, and what makes a good coach or a bad coach.
Oh, definitely. And then what kind of started that process for you getting onto YouTube? Were you coaching at the time and just thought it'd be cool to show that to the world, or how did that really come about into turning into something that you're doing all the time?
Well, you know, I was a long-term sub and an assistant coach at a high school in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I took a break from that and started my own business doing, you know, like high-end event videos and that kind of thing. So I was gone from coaching for a while throughout the early, you know, the 2000s. And so right around 2010, though, I was kind of looking for something else to do and see if I can't, you know, figure out a way to, you know, build another business. And, you know, YouTube at that point was still pretty young, and, you know, there were some people out there that were making, you know, good money just kind of being funny on camera. So I decided to let's mix all of my knowledge I do have of coaching, which I had been kind of dormant for a while, with all my experience as an editor on you know, the video side. And then, you know, I had experience as you know, performing improv, and I had, you know, a performance experience as well. So we thought, let's mix all these things together. Let's study what these people did to get big on YouTube, and see if we can recreate that. And so that was right around 2010. Now, a few months after that, I got hired to be the head coach at the school I had been at before. So that was a nice synergy there, where I could kind of use both jobs to enhance each other.
Awesome thinking about how you're able to play them off of each other. And I'm thinking from 2010 to now, I mean, obviously so much has changed, and it's more than just your subscriber count, but both the content you're making, the game itself has changed so much since then. Like there's so many things that are wildly different. What is the process like for you in making a video now, and how is it different from what you would do back then?
Oh, wow. I mean, you know, they're all still up there, the old videos, which I don't recommend anybody going to watch because they're pretty bad. But, and again, I can remember, I didn't know what I was doing. I remember trying to explain to people what I was doing in 2010. It was like really kind of hard. And in fact, just saying that you were a YouTuber, that wasn't even a term yet, was also sort of a stigma. Like, you know, how's your blog doing was always like the question. And I was like, yeah, it's not a blog. This is like I'm trying to build this into a business. So that was always frustrating in the beginning. But as far as like how it started, you know, I was on camera a lot more back then. I mean, I think it was more of a speed thing where now I just need, the quicker I can do it, the quicker to get it out, the better it'll do. Which means if I'm not on camera, then I can fix any kind of mistakes in the voiceover a lot easier than if I have to try and do it like in one take on camera. It takes me 10 takes. It just makes the process longer. That said, the irony is that some of the real keys to being a successful YouTuber is being on camera. So you'll probably see me more on camera going forward as it is. But that process was a lot. The videos were a lot shorter back then too. They were probably more trollish. Like, everyone was trying to sort of, one up each other in hot takes to see who can get, more attention that way. I always try to balance it, like once you're in the door with real, analysis. But I sense that there were some earlier videos, which are again up there that, might have, I might have been a lot more in my older age, being a lot more, accepting of certain players and how they played. Versus back then when I was, a little bit more rigid, I think, in my coaching thinking.
Oh my, it's really cool to think about that. And that also posed the, I know I brought it up at the beginning about how not just your channel has changed or YouTube itself has changed, but also the game that you're covering and the game that you're analyzing has changed so much. I've only, us as fans have kind of seen it from a fan's perspective, and all the coaches kind of keep to themselves. You've been spreading it and showcasing that, you could see from your channel over the years how all this stuff has changed. Everyone talks about the 3-point shot and how bigs can shoot now and all that. Have you seen any other changes in the game that you would say are hidden under that, but have also played a similar role?
I mean, I would have to say that the defenses are also gotten better, or even just more creative, perhaps. The rules changes also happened to allow zone to be played in some form in the NBA. So that changed things. And I would say that in reaction to the offenses getting better, the defensive things have gotten a little bit better as well. Whereas in the past, the rotational stuff that we wouldn't have seen because the ball didn't move as much. Like into the 90s and the 2000s, there wasn't as much ball movement as we have now. So as a result, you could argue it was easier to play defense. You could beat on guys because they weren't moving as much. And the lane was more clogged. So, aside from the obvious one of this much faster pace overall, which is probably as big as the 3-point shot itself, is the defensive rotations which have existed all the time. And they've always at every level had what we're seeing now, but it just seems like the execution is a lot more on point generally. Now, that said, we're seeing in this year that teams are just lighting it up from three, and the scores, again, it's more pace as well. But, we are seeing across the board, like sort of better understanding of defensive rotations and how to help, because they're forced to, because everyone can now beat anybody off the dribble these days, where back in the day, you'd only have one or two guys that could do that in each team.
It's funny because back in the day, can only even be just a few years ago. Back in 2015, we had half as many 25+ point per game scores as we do now. It's really insane to think about how fast everything can change.
Is that right? It's half as many 25-point scores.
So from 2010 to 2015, I believe it's 24 or something. It's in the mid 20s, and then from 2015 to 2020, it's 58. It's insane. I can send you the graphic after this. And because I remember when I was younger, it's like, Kobe's leading the league with 28 points a game, stuff like that. And now it's like, if you average 28 points a game, you might be fifth. Like if you're lucky. So,
I was just saying that, where like a 20 and 10 guy is not nearly as valuable. It's not nearly as impressive as it used to be, for sure.
100%. But thinking on that though, it's funny to see how things from the past can resurface and still play by the role. Like in the same way, if you're a good mid-range shooter, the mid-range shot is still a good shot. You just have to be good at it. You made your most recent video about Zion and how he's kind of bringing 90s ball back, and him and a few other players. What are you kind of seeing with that? Because while it might be said that the big man's dead, if you're good enough at that, you could still be very valuable, but you just have to be really good.
Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable because, here are three all-stars who do, Randall shoots threes, he shoots 4 a game, and it's the most surprising thing compared to how he started his career. You wouldn't have thought there's any way he'd get to 42%. Now, granted, they're wide open, like they're letting him shoot those. That wouldn't happen like in the playoffs, right? So I don't think that the 42% is it's a bit of a mirage, but the bottom line is he will create more spacing than somebody else who doesn't shoot threes. But it was remarkable to me to see these three guys. I mean, you can throw Ben Simmons in there who doesn't shoot. Giannis, you can throw in there who can't shoot from behind the arc. Although Giannis is, he hits a few. it is remarkable in today's game, which is so completely focused on the 3-point shot and spreading the floor, that you can still have these guys be really effective. And Zion is, going to lead the league in scoring without question if he stays healthy and continues playing the way he does. It's just so easy. He gets every shot right at the rim. And, it's rare to see a guy who's got the powerful build like that can go through people. But then you add the fact that he can jump over people, which is the rare thing. Randall cannot get off the ground very well. Guys in the past, like the Anthony Mason point forwards we had in the 90s, big, bruising, but skilled guys, did not have explosion like this. And so suddenly he's getting all the lobs. He gets free on the weak side backdoor cuts. And those are the things he's getting, just easy buckets every day, every game. And it's you think that wouldn't be so easy at some point, but there it is. The offense works well enough for him where he gets lost on the weak side. They find him. You got guys like Lonzo who are going to throw that pass every time. And you don't have to be accurate at all on those lobs.
It's always great when you have someone that you could just throw it to any part of the backboard and it'll end up in a highlight play. You brought up the Knicks, and as a native New Yorker, I just have to kind of jump a conversation over there. And they're winning games recently. I was at their last game, and I'm going to the one on Thursday, and it's fun feeling energy in the Garden. And people may be celebrating a little bit too much because nothing's happened yet. But with guys like Julius Randle, Emmanuel Quickly, everyone's talking about his floater. They have a couple fun, exciting pieces and maybe on film you might be able to see a deeper look. What are you seeing from them, and do you think it's something that they can build on?
Well, it's the Thibodeau effect, right? He comes in usually, except for maybe Minnesota, but he comes in, he takes a team that was underachieving or a ragtag group of people, whatever, and gets them to play defense a lot harder. The offense is rudimentary, but effective enough, and generally somebody will surprise you as a point guard. So in this tradition, they've had guys like DJ Augustine. There's another guy who played for the Nets who I'm forgetting who played for him, who had his played the best ball of his career. Gosh, he's gone in the league anyway, but it seems to happen enough. Nate Robinson played well under him too. So it's like these point guards, and quickly throw him in there as well. Now, the only problem I have with that is he's not playing enough minutes. He should be playing 27 minutes instead of 22 or whatever he's playing now. Accelerate that process, get him better quicker. He's not intimidated as it is. He's not like a rookie who's scared, doesn't want to finish, doesn't want to mix it up down low. That's my favorite part of when I watch rookies. And you see like LaMelo Ball the same way. These guys are not deferring. They're not just trying to blend in. They want to have an effect on the game. So there's no question this is all on the right path. The only question is at some point in the next few years, is Tibbs going to be the guy to get him to the next level? Or is it going to be simply the building blocks here and then they need somebody else to come in and kind of have a different style? Is it decidedly old school coach? There is room for that to work. But at some point, unless he changes, I suppose I haven't actually watched enough Knicks games where I've heard, usually you hear him in the past on the sideline. You can hear him on the TV just bellowing and yelling and bellowing all over all game long. I got to tell you, I think that kind of wears off at some point, and that might happen as well. That's the big concern as a Knicks fan. But either way, enjoy it because you're on an upward trajectory. You're going to have much better basketball being played for the next several years than you had in the last several years. And that's certainly cause for rejoice.
God willing, that actually happens. Thank you so much for giving me some hope. And hopefully everyone listening to the show will walk away from this feeling a little bit better about the future of the Knicks organization. You brought up LaMelo Ball, and he's obviously someone that's so fun to talk about, but it's not even so much fun because of the weight of the flash or the highlights. It's just he's actually good at basketball, and people kind of forget. A lot of people forget that and think it's all flash. Can you talk about him a little bit and what you've seen? Because he's also someone that I feel like comes up all the time, but people kind of misunderstand exactly why he's coming up.
For sure. And I've done a couple of videos of him in the past, like in the deep past, where we were like, "This, you better watch this guy." I mean, I had seen him play as a freshman in high school in the, it was the city championship game or one of the state finals games, one of those, as a 13-year-old. He was young, by the way. He was playing up. I don't think he would have normally been in ninth grade for his age at that time, playing with his brothers. And he was already the guy you're like, you know what? He might be the best ball brother of them all because he was able to do these things at such an early age as it was. So, following him and the IQ, and by the way, Lonzo's got the similar thing. He's just kind of being constrained a lot more in his role, which is really frustrating to me. I don't know if that's going to change, but there's no question that Lonzo must be looking at some of the clips of his brother and being like, I could do that, man. If I could just get the ball early enough in the backcourt, I can make those passes. So, but the thing with LaMelo is it's not just I mean, listen, he can score, he can shoot, he can finish. He's got a lot of creative finishing package at the rim, but the threat of the pass is so strong that it makes everything else that much better. He had a pass last night that I shared that went viral on Twitter where it was sort of on the break, right-handed, one-handed, kind of an underhand flip bounce pass. And you could see that Terry Rozier kind of like hesitated. He wasn't sure if he was really going to throw it or not. And it was such a good pass. It still was right in stride for him to finish with a nice reverse. And it was flashy, I suppose, but if you study what he did, and I'm going to actually do a quickie video on this on YouTube as a YouTube short, it probably was the only way he could have possibly gotten that pass through. And that's what we've discovered. A lot of the fancy stuff that, like in the past, the coaches would have forbade players from doing. It turns out it's actually the most fundamental, best way to get the pass from A to B. You know, even like the behind the back pass off of a pick and roll, and you want to pass it to the roll man popping. That behind the back pass is the best way to throw that. And everyone should have that in their arsenal in high school level too. And, you know, you can't let coaches say, oh, that's too fancy. You can't do that. I'm that guy who was always like, not only can you do it, let's make it a fundamental where we are drilling it and practicing it like you would an overhead pass or a bounce pass.
That's incredibly interesting. So taking that back to like how coaches would actually drill that, how would you, if you were coaching high school team, I'd imagine you'd be coaching very differently now than you would have 10, 15, 20 years ago. So how would you drill something like that? That's so cool.
Oh, easy. I mean, that's easy because you're talking about, you want reps, right? You need to have reps over reps. And you also want to have it with defense as well, because no defense reps aren't as beneficial. And so I think a lot of coaches, not to get too wonky in the coaching side, but I think coaches get concerned that what if Coach K walks into my practice right at this moment and it looks chaotic? I can't have that. When in reality, it's the chaos that helps these players get better faster. So you have to have drills that have a lot of live defense in there where they're competing, where they're actually trying to, make a pass where the defense knows where you're trying to throw it to. That's how you get the variability of the play and the jazz and the flow. And that's where they can learn on their own to develop other ways of making those passes. So, you could easily just without defense, 2 dribbles and then throw it back and then make a line of a 2-line drill, right? And like ball screen pop, just do it. Okay. After 3 or 4 times though, without defense, then you get into a live situation and just let them play. If they're falling around, the ball goes flying, great. That's where you get the improvement. Don't be so worried about blowing the whistle every single play, over talking, over coaching. You could, I always say this, like in terms of like even teaching a jump shot, you could lock a 10-year-old kid in the gym who had never played before and you can tell him, teach yourself how to shoot the basketball. And he would have a better form after 2 months than a bad coach teaching all the bad fundamentals that don't apply anymore to the game for shooting. That guy would have a much worse shot than a guy who just taught himself for 10 months at age 10. So that's the key here. That's the control you have to let go as a coach to allow the players to find these things, make mistakes, and put them in situations where it's live and quick and they have to improve their reaction time. You'll see a lot better results. It might look crazy in the very beginning, but aren't we all trying to be best at the end of the season? Like that's sort of the goal here. So don't be so worried about like midway through the season if the practices are still looking a little chaotic.
That's fantastic. And it's definitely something I have to really think about and clip this and watch it over again to really make sure I understand it. Because with my freshmen too, the same thing happens. Oh, what if the varsity coach comes in and what if we're not doing what we're supposed to do right? But in the end of the day, maybe that's something we have to have that conversation. Maybe it's what's best for the players. So thank you for that.
By the way, we were talking about building culture, and it's really about trust between the player and the coach, right? And the coaches are always railing and complaining and all these things. And it's like, if you take the time to work on individual skills, and here's the difference like between coaching in 2010 and coaching now. I used to think that I can't spend any time doing individual instruction in my practices. We got to do, work on our zone. We got to work on our zone offense. We got to work on our zone press. We got to do all these different 5-man things. We don't have time to be doing, our layup finishing packages. Well, then you realize that none of that offense you're trying to run means anything if they can't finish or they can't shoot or they can't dribble. So I realized actually even after that, even though I was resistant to even the notion of doing all the individual skills, all of my triangle offense breakdown drills, which I did incessantly to teach the triangle offense back then, they were actually those drills as well. We were doing live individual skill development without me even really noticing it at the time. I would do it even a lot more now. That's the thing that we need. And I feel like the idea that So there's no better way to develop that trust between a coach and a player than to get in there on individual instruction and work with them on finishing layups or shooting the jump shot, right? Like that's where they will trust that you want them to get as good as they can be. And that's what you want, right? I mean, obviously the coach needs to trust that the player will do what they want them to do when they're in the game, but the player has to trust the coach. And it's hard. It's like a real sort of abstract idea. How do you develop trust? It's like, no, it's really easy in my mind. Just roll your sleeves up, spend time in a regular practice, working one-on-one with these guys and doing individual drills. That goes a long way to developing that trust from the player to the coach, which I think is as important, if not more, than the other way around.
This is so interesting, and it's raising the question to me about getting teams to mesh together and really building that chemistry. I'm thinking about the team like the Nets, who they have all this talent, right? But now their biggest thing is, can they figure it out? Can they all become close? Can they all make it work? I'm not saying so much that hypothetically, if you were Steve Nash, but hypothetically, what would you do with a team that had all that perimeter, all kinds of talent in general? So you could outshoot teams, you can outrun teams. What would you do to kind of get them to all become really close with one another?
I mean, I was thought you were going to ask me what would I do to like get them to be a little bit better on defense, which is really the only thing they have to do.
I could jump that. I could throw that right in there because that's I was thinking like teamwork and stuff, but you kind of already I'll do that. I'll do the defense stuff.
I mean, it's interesting because that Kyrie and KD and Harden are already buddies, right? And then Joe Harris can he hang socially in that thing like maybe the other guys. So obviously, I mean at that level it's weird because they're all rich. You can do whatever you want, like off the court. Hey, let's go take out an entire bowling alley just for us for a whole night, right? Whatever you want to do. You can do all that if you wanted to. In fact, they probably should do that. Like bowling's great, by the way. I love that for team bonding. Obviously, the more you can develop that, it helps. But for them, like they are that good. I mean, they literally are as good as they want to be. And the defense is probably getting a little bit better now that they had a little bit more time to practice. And they don't even have KD on the floor, who's going to be like their best defender too. But I mean, as a coach, I'd just be like, listen, you can do anything you want on offense. I won't say anything. Just execute these things I need to do on defense and give me some good out of bounds plays when there's a stoppage and play and I draw it up. Those are the only two things I'll ask you to do, and then to do hard and really execute well. And then I don't say anything about what you do on offense. Those kind of, and that works at the high school level too. I mean, I can remember when I was coaching and I was using, like I didn't use advanced analytics, but we were using like offensive rebounds and turnovers and 3-point percentage and these things. And I would say, listen, if we can just shoot, 32% from three, then it's not such a big deal if we turn the ball over 15 times. Or if we get out rebounded by 10 rebounds, if we can shoot a little bit better than them. And it takes away a lot of the sort of emotion and the perfection of the game that coaches, I think I still see coaches to this day, the high school level, who want to coach a shutout, right? And they just wig out when the other team scores. And it's like, dude, they're going to do that about 25, 30 more times this game. It's going to happen. You're not going to stop it. And why make your players absolutely insane and crazy by yelling at them and screaming at them like that on a defensive mistake? You know what I mean?
100%. Thinking about, I saw a stat recently about how both Kyrie, KD, and Harden are the top three in isolation scoring by a mile. It's not even close. In the NBA, and just how efficient they are in isolation, but also how well they've been meshing together. So, Coach Nixon, what would you do with all the talent they have offensively to kind of make them work on defense?
So, the best defensive teams in the NBA spend time on every practice on their defensive rotations. And so like a team I got a chance to see practices with, like the Warriors, for instance, no matter how short that practice is, they're going to give Ron Adams his 25 minutes of his progressive, probably the best rotational defensive drill I've ever seen. It kind of flows from every position, and you get every kind of rotation and on-ball and off-ball defensive position you need in all-in-one drill. And he runs through the iterations, and after about 20 minutes, you've covered it. It's amazing. It really is amazing. And then you go watch them in the games that night, and they X out perfectly. They rotate from the weak side, drop down from the weak side as well. They do it perfectly. So that really is the key for all these NBA teams, is the consistency in practice every time they have a practice. And then the more practices they have, if you run it right. Now, obviously this drill is brilliant. A lot of teams run it. I've seen other teams take it as well. And there's other versions of that too. But the key here is the consistency, and then the quality of the drill is so high that you couldn't help but just get better over time with that kind of reinforcement every practice.
all this stuff about defense and closing out of rotations. When you think about sometimes the most basic things with NBA defense, it's kind of the pick and roll coverages that everyone always talks about. With the Bucks, it's always kind of mind-boggling to me and many other fans about how simple they defend ball screens with a drop, and how it's really effective in the regular season, but in the playoffs they've had a lot of trouble. Can you kind of shed some light on why that is?
Sure. I mean, anyone who knows my stuff, this is going to be boring because I've talked about it so much, but I've done 3 or 4 videos probably on it. But I've always been troubled by it. And then I had to scratch my head and say, well, listen, they're the number 1 defensive rated team in the league for 2 straight years. It's like I must be wrong. And then they get in the playoffs. It doesn't work nearly as well because the teams are better and they're prepared. So when you drop, it's really not even about the drop, because everybody drops, and that's fine because you don't want the big to get beaten so easily from a ball handler coming around the pick and roll. It's the helping one pass away that leaves the easiest pass that a high schooler can make to the wing or to the corner for an open jump shot. The defenders cannot run as fast as the ball moves in the air as in a pass. So it's a real big problem that they do consistently. And as a result, they give up the most wide open 3-pointers than anybody over the last 3 or 4 years. Now, again, they were giving up the most when they were the number 1 defensive rated team in terms of frequency. The percentage of those threes, though, were always like in the middle or like toward the bottom of the middle in terms of percentage. And the analytics guys would probably indicate to you that it's really kind of random. 3-point defense is just random to them, right? If they're wide open, if they're not, nothing the defense does really affects that. And they're so freaking wrong. It's like drives me nuts, primarily because you can limit the amount. And I'm not even sure they understand, like from an X's and O standpoint, how you could limit the amount of threes being taken or open threes being taken. It's very, very simple. Don't allow middle penetration, and that's all about how you move your feet and how the focus of the defense, and don't help one pass away. And if you have a team that does the opposite of those 2 things in the Bucks, they're going to give up a lot of open threes. So it's not random. It is how their style. Now, they were getting away with it, in my opinion. Like at some point, as a coach, for me as a defensive coach, I would say I would still want to limit the amount of open 3-point shots the other team gets, especially as we move into this era and deeper in this era and more shooters. They were getting away with it for 2 years. Not necessarily in the playoffs, although I got to do one more deep dive. I can't remember if I did this, but I have a feeling if we look at the 3-point percentage of teams in the playoffs against the Bucks, that must have gone up on their open shots versus the regular season. And certainly this year, where everyone is shooting a lot better with no fans in the stands, and there's no pressure when the people are screaming and yelling at you, which you would like to think doesn't necessarily affect NBA players, but it does. And the numbers are bearing that out. They're now no longer. They're now giving up the highest percentage on those wide open 3-point shots, both in frequency and in makes. And as a result, their defensive rating is like 13th, 14th. It's the lowest it's been in 4 years. And their record is not nearly as good. And the irony is that their offense is all-time great. As of last week, they were already ahead of what the Mavericks were last year, who were the all-time high in offensive rating. So were a couple other teams, by the way. Like that's how good everyone's been playing offensively. So there is an indication that the defense has, needs to step up a little bit better anyway. But with no question, if you're looking at a defense that's particularly a bad fit for what's going on in this season, it's the Bucks.
And that really raised a really interesting question to me. And thinking about with the Bucks, Fred VanVleet, I remember that in that 2019 playoffs, when I actually went to Toronto to watch that game, and everyone thinks I'm a jinx for Giannis losing, but that's when Fred VanVleet hit. He had a son, went ballistic from 3, and it's kind of that, but also how much do you want to attribute that to him both making shots, but also the Bucks allowing him to take open shots? It kind of goes both ways. But then thinking about how watching teams' mistakes, we've been talking a lot about what teams do right, but we haven't really touched enough about what teams do wrong. Do you watch during the season at all, like teams like the Pistons that, have terrible records that aren't winning games, but you're trying to see, okay, what could they improve on? What could I as a coach maybe make a video about to show this team can do this to get better?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to watch those games. And, I got my little internal chats with my buddies where we're like, look, you won't believe this move, and the clown show that we're watching. So, there's no question that some of the worst teams have, those players struggle finishing at the rim. They do a nice move and they cannot get the ball in the basket once they get there. They struggle mightily with execution. I know the Suns a few years ago, I would see the same sets that the Warriors were running for like wide open shots, that they would run them and they wouldn't screen properly. They wouldn't cut right away. The angle was off. The pass was late. All of those things. And just like across the board, it's like you almost have to start over from the beginning to kind of reteach the game from the ground up for those kind of teams. Because, you watch like when the Warriors were great, they could throw in a set that afternoon, 5-on-0 in 10 minutes, and then they would run it perfectly that night for a great shot. That does not happen that way with the bottom teams who don't have. I mean, you can't say they don't have talent because they obviously have talent, but there's a lot of things involved. And that's also the way you coach and the way you teach. I've observed over the years some really head scratching coaching. And, you want to, it's kind of like in the political realm too. Like some of these guys might get a pass because they were born in a certain time of our country where certain things were acceptable. And they're struggling now to like kind of to progress. And they don't understand why can't I say this word anymore, right? Like, God darn it, I should be able to. And it's like, no, you can't say these things. Same thing with the coaching. It's like, standing around for 25 minutes straight, just talking and droning on about like your game plan versus talking for 3 minutes and then getting them up and moving into that game plan and actually having them sweat and all those things. Like those are the weird things that made me scratch my head watching these things. So, it's a mixture of those, of a couple different things. I would say though that the younger coaches, I think, are better at the communication. They're more progressive on what they're running and how they're teaching it. Like the Pistons, Dwayne Casey's been around for a long time. I haven't seen him at a coaching clinic in a long time. I don't know if he's been to one. So you got to wonder about that, whether or not that's why these teams are taking, more chances on Bjorkgren in Indiana, Taylor. Taylor Jenkins in Memphis. These guys were kind of no names. Chris Finch, who's a protege of Nick Nurse, is another one. These guys really had to coach their way out of a paper bag in different leagues and different places around the world. Versus like a former player who just jumped right in, had maybe a talented team, and never really had to learn that coaching thing. So those are all those factors play into it.
There have definitely been so many recent young head coach signings, and it seems because everyone kind of looks at it as, okay, well, you're older, you have more experience, you're obviously a better coach, and it might not always work out that way. And me being 20 years old, I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the Phil Jackson tree never did well. The Greg Popovich tree is kind of not doing well either. They just fired Floyd Pierce. They, Brett Brown, even when Brett Brown, they got better, like Brett Brown, my antennas would go up a little bit. Budenholzer, who else is there? Mike Brown, who's now an assistant with the Warriors. That whole coaching chain is interesting because it hasn't done well either. And meanwhile, you write out the Spurs, they're whatever, and then look at where they're doing now. Popovich has got them right back in the thick of things, and they're a tough team. With 2 All-Stars, by the way. So it's not like they're not they don't have talent, but you want to sleep on that whole lineage, and then you realize, Popovich is still doing it and still grinding away pretty well.
It's amazing how it can go both ways. And I'm curious, you said scratching your head, but I know you're always shaking your head. So what is that like with the coin mark? Like what do you normally do when you see stuff like this? What's your reaction?
I usually I'll send a clip over to somebody, to my buddy, and just like, right, make it stop in all caps, or I laugh too. I sometimes just have to laugh at the just sheer display of ridiculousness of some of these plays, and like, what are they training? And or I recoil in horror when I see like guys that they're gonna get somebody hurt. Even like Giannis to me trains like. He doesn't train with defense, it looks like to me, because he almost like ignores the defense when he's out there doing his move, and then kind of seems surprised when a really athletic, good player gets in his way and like cuts him off. He's not prepared. And some of those misses he has are just awful. Like, this is not an MVP level play. You can't miss like that at the rim like that. And then there are times when he just barrels in there, elbows flying, guys taking it to the face and the neck and the shoulders. It's like someone's going to get hurt, and that's what makes me really concerned about some of the guys who can get really going fast and who are so powerful, like Giannis.
So it's so awesome thinking about that coaching stuff. And I do have a couple of quick fire coaching questions if we can run through them. One of them is when it comes to play calling, like, because maybe old school style is very coach centric, where the coach is calling out the play. It's kind of how you see it in movies, where the coach is kind of doing some hand signal. Now in the modern day, maybe more players are taking a little more ownership of that. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'll give you an example of last year. So Rick Carlisle in Dallas typically calls every single play down, every play. Now, he tried that when they got Rondo, And if you might remember, it didn't go so well. And it was Carlisle's fault. Like, if you have a guy like Rondo, you don't need to be calling a play every single time down. And, Rondo probably didn't explain that to him well enough, but that should be known. But last year, he finally stopped doing that. What was the result? An all-time great offensive rating team, the best offensive we've ever seen, right? And Luka obviously is a big part of that as well. But part of that was he wasn't having to micromanage this guy and this team. So, as a triangle offense coach, like, I never called plays. I mean, out of a timeout, okay, let's draw a quickie, whatever. And at the end of the game, that's it. Other than that, it was organic and movement and spacing and angles. And that's all I wanted. I wanted them to develop their own way of attacking and figuring it out, because I can't get out there on the court with them. And so without question, the less the coach does offensively for them, or feels like he has to, the better.
Awesome stuff there, and thinking about the dynamic there with players and coaches. And then moving on from that, I mean, a lot of maybe loyal listeners to your show might know this answer, but what's your favorite action in the modern game?
Oh, my favorite action. I mean, it used to be sort of like the elevator play where, a guy shoots through between two players who then close the doors and, set a double screen for him. I like, the hammer screen where a guy drives on one side, and on the other side, a guy is moving to the corner with a back screen, a flare screen there, a hammer screen, and you almost jump out of bounds under the basket to throw that pass. I like that kind of stuff. I mean, listen, any kind of backdoor action is exciting to me. I've been actually finally, once and for all, got organized and started saving plays that when I see them into a folder so I can have them and reference them a little bit easier. But it's always the misdirection stuff. I mean, my favorite individual move is the fake handoff. Because it's so clever and it's so old school, right? Let's use the handoff. And then, the guy who's guarding the handoffer, always moves toward the cutter, a little bit, and then you fake that and you go. In fact, I want to start developing some more dribbling moves out of that to fake the handoff. So you might remember Allen Iverson did a video or did a commercial for probably Pepsi. And he did a move where it was like a fake spin move, where he starts to spin and then he brings the ball back around his back and then catches it on the same side, same arm, same hand. And it's hard to picture, without being on the court, but you can use that as a fake handoff because it kind of feels like a handoff if a cutter is coming around the top of you and then throw the ball back. So I've been trying to develop all kind of things like that too, just to kind of open up some of the real old school actions that still work perfectly in today's game with the new style ball handling that we have, which everybody can do now or is trying to do and understands how to develop better. When I was growing up, no one knew how to teach dribbling properly. And so as a result, I never got I didn't get great at dribbling, even though I worked harder than anybody, and I should have been. I had the work ethic of all these guys that are now, but I was sitting there stagnant, dribbling in place, one hand, rapid fire as hard as I could, and all that, wasting all that time. When in reality, it's the dynamic ball handling drills where you're moving in space and executing these different moves with the ball in your hand, dribbling, that get you better faster.
Of course, and it's so interesting to think about how that skill development can come into play with that, and how all these actions can evolve. Because with hammer screen stuff like that was never a thing a few years ago, and now it's all I see on my Twitter timeline and everywhere else. So this is more of a.
You're welcome.
When it comes to defense, if you had to pick one for a season, would you foul or defend up three?
Oh, I mean, listen, I keep hitting my head with my shoe every night because it keeps happening. You foul. You foul. Now, you can show me some stats that might show it's pretty close, but even those stats I've seen indicate that even though it's within 3 or 4 percentage of points of each other, it's in the favor of fouling, which to me means, okay, I don't care if it's 3 points, 3 point percentage difference between winning and with fouling or winning and defending. That's a win a season, right? Or whatever that is. But the best way I can explain it for any coach who's listening to this who wants to argue about it is, and we saw this last night or 2 nights ago with the Clippers. And because, by the way, this is a Popovich thing, he does not foul, and neither does his proteges, because this was who did the Clippers play? The Bucks, maybe, and
the Bucks on Friday. The Bucks on Friday night in Brooklyn, and
and they're up by 3, and they give up a wait, was it? No, it wasn't Brooklyn. It was the Bucks and the Clippers, right? I think it's Bucks and Clippers.
It was Paul George who got the 3. Yeah. It was Paul George.
The guy. What I'm thinking is Kawhi Leonard got the 3, Either way, the point being that they were up by 3, they didn't foul. There was like 7 seconds to go. They had 3 chances to take the foul in that interim. And then Kawhi Leonard comes up and shoots a relatively open 3 to tie the game, and it missed. So they got away with it. But the point is that if you practice it properly and know how to foul without fouling it when the guy's shooting the ball for a 3, you eliminate any kind of risk of getting caught on a bad switch or on a back door or on a drive. All those things that can go wrong when a team is prepared and running a set that they practice and it's a clever thing. Just eliminate that. Take the foul, put them on the line, get the rebound. I mean, the idea that they're going to make the first one, miss the second, somehow get the rebound, and somehow it's going to get back out to the 3-point line and you're going to lose is that's even more far-fetched than anything I can imagine. So, and if that happens, then just tip your cap and, just figure the basketball gods didn't have it in for you that night. So that's the biggest argument I have is like, just eliminate the possibility of getting beat on all the different ways you can get beat on a defensive possession with miscommunication or falling asleep or screwing up a switch. So all those things happen, and you can't plan for those. Eliminate them.
Awesome to think about that stuff, and then I'm gonna. When it comes to what happens when you maybe try to defend up 3, you leave yourself susceptible to a moment, right, where a game-winning shot happens or something to that effect happens, and you become susceptible to a moment. NBA Top Shot's been blowing up lately, and I'm really curious if you could kind of explain to our viewers, because I even though I'm so into basketball, obviously, I've just kind of got acquainted with it recently. So I'm really curious as to what you've seen growing in that market and where you see it going.
Yeah. Well, I just had one of the guys on my show last week or a few days ago about it because, that seems to be everyone wants to talk about. And had I not had any experience like with cryptocurrency and investing there, I probably would have been completely confused as well. But the bottom line is they are packaging together moments, which are, a highlight from 3 different angles. That's a digital file that you can buy. And people place value on that. And it's officially licensed. So it's like if you wanted to buy a playing card, an NBA card, there's a lot of issues there. You got to keep it completely pristine. You got to keep it in the right settings. It can get folded, it gets ripped, whatever, wet. This eliminates that because you have it as a virtual thing. And, in this exchange they've created, there are people that say, oh, I want to buy that from you and I'll offer you X amount of money. Some of those have gone for $40,000 or $200,000 at some point. And, the whole key here is that it's blockchain based, which is just like crypto. So it's official and it's a licensed thing from the NBA. If I try to do that and say, here's a highlight with 3 different angles, there is a lot less value to that than when it's officially sanctioned by the NBA. Now, I know there's still a leap there as far as really like, how can that be? But when you get on there and they have these packs and you don't know what's in the packs, right? There's like 3 different moments in there. I was kind of screwing out like, oh, I can't wait. I want to see what pack might I get if I buy one, I totally got it. I get it now. It becomes like a game. It's got all sorts of mixtures of like, the 2K feel to it, the My Career kind of thing. It's got, the crypto in there as well because you could make money. I wouldn't say this is the kind of thing you want to quit your job and day trade moments. I don't think that's really where it's going because it's not like a volatile like the crypto is, but the bottom line is it's a vibrant thing. They've got hundreds of thousands of people have now, registered and are in these things, watching the live shows. They've got NBA players who are also involved. And it's probably going to end up turning into some version of currency. There's already a notion that like a couple of these really random plays have sold for a lot of money. And they're trying to surmise that maybe this is just a handshake, a wink deal where they were going to sell another package really, or give it as a gift. They didn't want anyone else to know. I'm going to give you this LeBron gift, but you buy this Joe Ingles layup from me for $20,000, and then we'll be even. That might be what's happening. But what that really means is that they're using this as currency, and at some point you can get your currency out of there to somewhere else. And, there's some tax implications. You might be able to avoid taxes. I'm not going to say that's legal. It's probably not. But, there's a certain value, especially with crypto and these things, to having cash and having interactions that are a little bit more anonymous or a little bit more protected from a lot of the, the banks and all that stuff. So it's fascinating to see. But yeah, it's all rooted in like the collection of these like trading cards that are virtual. But once you get into it and you see like, oh yeah, there's a bit of an element of surprise. You don't know what you're going to get on these packs and that kind of things. You get it. It kind of becomes apparent to you pretty quickly.
I love how this conversation, we kind of focus so much on things that are changing or new or things that are about to just evolve over the next few years, because it's not like we spoke about, oh, isn't it great, Coach Nick, how the pick and roll has been the same for 50 years? Like that wasn't what this conversation was about at all. It was so innovative, and I really appreciate having you on. It was so cool getting to hear, obviously, as much as I've seen all your videos, it's so much cooler having you tell me in person, virtually, having you tell me to my face. So it's really so cool. And thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm in.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.